Welcome on into WFRV Plus Sports Night. Cameron there with you on this Wednesday, and the first Wednesday without Packers football. Kind of crazy to think about. Well, what I'm pretty much saying is last week there was no Packers practice, but it felt like we had news, right? The Matt LaFleur situation was circulating, and now not really much surrounding the Packers, but there is new news with Green Bay as former Packer and Hall of Famer Al Harris, who is currently or was the defensive backs coach for the Chicago Bears, and then was a DB's coach with the Cowboys before that, and then in between the 2010s was with the Chiefs. He interviewed for the Packers defensive coordinator job today, so that makes it 4 confirmed interviews that have happened here in Green Bay for that defensive coordinator job ever since Jeff Hafley left to be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. But that is not where we start here on WFRV Plus Sports Night, because news just dropped 25 minutes ago, 8:45 p.m. The New York Mets have acquired all-star right-hander Freddie Peralta in a trade with the Milwaukee Brewers, and the Brewers will get Brandon Sproat and Jet Williams. Now, Williams is the 30th ranked prospect on MILB's top 100 list in the minors. Brandon Sproat is not on the top 100, but the two of them are 2 top 5 prospects in the Mets system. But hey, Freddie Peralta no longer a Milwaukee Brewer, this team's ace from a year ago, in which they went all the way to the NLCS only to be swept by the Dodgers. Honestly, doesn't come as much of a surprise to me. And some might say, gosh, how can you let him go? Well, Freddie Peralta signed a 5-year, $15.5 million deal 4 years ago with the Brewers. And it was a club option for the final 2 years. They obviously picked up his club option for $8.1 million or $8 million last year and $8.1 million for this year, which means that after this next year, he'd be a free agent, most likely get paid a whole lot of money by a team that would like him. I think a lot of teams would like him because Freddie Peralta has been very, very impressive, was an all-star for the Brewers this last year. And I mean, the stats, they really speak for themselves. A guy that, pitched in 33 games, all starts, had 17 wins, the most in his career by 5. An ERA sub 3, his whip was 108. I mean, pitched over 170 innings the last 2 seasons, just a durability guy, someone you can rely on, had over 200 strikeouts on the year, top 15 whip, that being in the major leagues. So it was a great trade asset for the Brewers. Pat Murphy said the other day during his Pat Murphy tour just about the budget discrepancy in the majors, which Milwaukee is near, if not the bottom, because they are, the smallest franchise in the major leagues, at least the smallest market or city, that they would need to thread the needle when it came to payment and when it came to how much that they could offer players. And you saw that this past year with, shipping guys off and bringing in bats and arms that produced in the playoffs, but didn't cost them a whole lot of money. And they knew by years 4 and 5 of Freddie Peralta's deal, if he was the pitcher they expected him to be and the starter they expected him to be, that he was a very valuable trade asset. And now Milwaukee has bolstered their farm system. You think about Sal Frelick. You think about other guys that have come through that farm system and are now starters for the Brewers at a low cost. And that's exactly what Sproat and Williams can be. So for those wondering, why in the world would you make that trade as your best pitcher? You kind of already have a depleting pitching staff in terms of, injuries pop up. And we saw what happened this last year. But Jacob Misiorowski is the guy for the future. You think of Jose Quintana might be, on the lower end of his career, but this pitching staff needed to get revamped if they didn't want to spend a lot of money on it, and they don't have a lot of money. So a team like the Mets most likely will either take this final year of his deal and run with it and pay him next offseason, during the season maybe, or just give him a massive extension in which pitchers are getting paid just a lucrative amount. Right? And not just pitchers, I mean, everything. Hitters, like, That's the nature of Major League Baseball. Is this Brewers team had to thread the needle, and that's the only approach they can take because they do not have the amount of money that the Mets have, that the Dodgers have, that the Yankees have. And you just saw the Kyle Tucker deal go down, 4 years, 240. I mean, he's getting paid $1 million in salary and $64 million in signing bonus. $64 million is almost half of what Milwaukee can afford in a payroll. So they just couldn't afford Freddie Peralta. So it's better to ship him off. And this was the latest you could do it. Entering the final year of his contract, only getting paid $8 million. Freddie Peralta is deserved to be paid a whole lot more than that. So what will the Brewers do? That's the question moving forward. But they can't do it with Freddie Peralta. At no point did anyone think they could in the future, unless they wanted to drop a bag on him and not be able to pay anyone else. And honestly, with the price tag attached to Freddie Peralta, you're seeing what they did with William Contreras and his deal in arbitration. I mean, they want to pay him $1 million less. He asked for 9.9. They asked for mid-8. It's like, gosh, one of your best players on your team, just pay him the extra $1 million. But the Milwaukee Brewers have to penny pinch. That's the nature of it. Why do you think the Detroit Tigers aren't paying Tarek Skubal $32 million and they proposed pre-arbitration $19 million? Skubal deserves 32, but he deserves 32 from a different organization that can afford 32. And the Tigers can afford it, but they have to look at longevity with the roster. And you just can't pay one player a majority of your payroll. And a lot of teams have a restricted payroll that aren't the Mets, who have a $1 billion owner. And by billion, I mean a billionaire owner who has a whole lot of billions and is willing to spend it all. And the Dodgers, who you just saw, look at Mark Walter, just bought the Lakers for $10 billion. Like, they can pay. The Brewers can't pay. So they wouldn't have been able to pay Freddie Peralta. You might as well trade him at the right time. And I think it was the right time to trade Peralta. I get it. Coming off the best year of his career, an all-star nod, his best ERA. He had never gone below 3.5 outside of 2021. But if you remember, that 2021 year was his breakout season, in which the Brewers said, oh, wow, that contract we just gave him after 2020 was worth it, wasn't it? But yeah, you're going to miss him. I mean, because you just hope and pray Brandon Woodruff is okay moving forward. But think of Corbin Burns. They couldn't pay him either. So they said, we're just going to get rid of him. And this just seems like the theme in Milwaukee. And that's the nature of having an organization that you simply just can't pay him more than what you want than what your payroll is restricted to. And I get the stats are off the charts. I mean, over 200 strikeouts in each of the last 3 seasons. In 4 of the last 5, a minimum of 195. And just the innings pitched. I mean, at least 140 innings pitched in 4 of the last 5 years. In the last 3 seasons, he has easily been this team's ace, in which other players have gone down with injury, and he has just been steady Eddie. At least 10 wins in each of his last 3 years. I mean, you're talking about a guy whose WAR was in the mid-2s and was over 5 in 2025. I mean, there was no doubt this guy was an all-star. If it wasn't for the likes of Paul Skeens, he would have been the all-star starter, right? Like, it's just the nature of Major League Baseball, folks. The Milwaukee Brewers cannot afford it, and that's why they didn't pay him. The nature of baseball. And sometimes you just got to shake your head and say, well, it's just all we got. It's just all we got. And the Brewers just don't have enough. And that's why they had to trade Freddie Peralta. And it was the right time to do it. Against maybe popular opinion, I think a lot of people understand why they did the deal. But maybe against some popular opinion, Freddie Peralta was not going to be a Brewer after this year, whether it had been at the trade deadline or beforehand. And when the Mets came calling, they have an okay farm system. You might as well jump on that opportunity to add some arms, or pardon me, add some bats to your lineup. Jet Williams, former 14th overall pick. They've been talking about him for a while. He's a righty, second baseman, can play center field, can play shortstop. And then let's look up Brandon Sprode as well. I think that's how you say his last name. Pitcher, righty, big arm, big dude, 6'3". Joined the Mets last year. And it looks like Tobias Myers is also in the deal heading over to the Mets. So you drop a guy in Myers as well, who was a starting pitcher for you this past year. I mean, again, this staff is depleted right now for Milwaukee. What they can do, I don't know. But they did just add a pitcher in the offseason a couple months ago. But yeah. So it's Sproat and Williams to the Brewers, 2 prospects, top 5 in the Mets organization. And Freddie Peralta and Tobias Myers, 2 starting caliber pitchers, at least Peralta is, in the starting lineup for New York. So that's the big news of the day. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I mentioned it, Al Harris interviewed for the Packers DC job. He played for the team from 03 to 09. Of course, his most iconic moment was the pick 6 on Matt Hasselbeck at the G of Lambeau Field, going into overtime of that playoff game. That heads or tails, heads landed heads. He said, we're going to take the ball and score. And then he throws the pick 6, and it's Harris that takes it back, calls game, and the Packers advance in the playoffs. So could be cool to have Harris back in the green and gold. We're going to chat about him next on WFRV Plus Sports Night. And we're back here on WFRV Plus Sports Night. Cameron is there with you all night long. So Jeff Hafley will have his introductory press conference as the head coach of the Miami Dolphins on Thursday, which means that deal is done, finalized. The Dolphins have already announced it. And now the Packers are in the market for a new defensive coordinator. An interesting name that was floated around today, a former Packer, a Hall of Famer, a Packers Hall of Famer, that is. Played 7 years with the green and gold in between stints with other teams. Most recently was on that Bears sideline during the Packers collapse, or at least in the booth coaching. But on the Chicago sideline, on the Chicago side of things, is their passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach. And if you remember, and this is the Bears team in which their secondary was one of the best in the NFL in takeaways, if not the best. Let me look that up. Turnover numbers, NFL team stats. Let's look this up and see who led. Nah, not in the postseason. In the regular season, that is. And let's see. The Bears, in terms of differential, they were phenomenal. 23 interceptions, which I'm fairly sure, led the NFL. So you could possibly add a guy who led a defensive back room to pick off quarterbacks 23 times, and linebackers could have had those too. But I mean, he's coming from a squad where he, revamped them into a takeaway machine. You think of Kevin Byard, who was phenomenal. I think he had 5 picks through the first 10 weeks, led the NFL in picks for a while. And yeah, that could be great. Some, not just new blood, but you're talking about a guy that was just out of the NFL a decade ago and can really relate to these players. Very passionate, knows the Packers organization, knows the Green Bay way. I think that would be amazing. I think that'd be great for the green and gold. Now, a lot of people have been throwing out the name Jim Leonhard, the Wisconsin native, who cannot be interviewed until after the AFC Championship, or at least this next Sunday, because of his coaching in the playoffs. And that could also be a good move. But then you look at Matt LaFleur, who supposedly, reportedly, had denied to even want to interview Jim Leonhard. And Matt LaFleur, one of his best friends, is Raheem Morris, who just got fired from the Atlanta job. But he has not, it's not confirmed that he's interviewed for the Packers DC role. So it's a lot of speculation right now. I wish I could give you more of a concrete answer, but there isn't really much more to give outside of if Al Harris becomes the Packers DC. I mean, I think that would click on in so many ways, just because you're adding a guy who, like I said, can relate to the players just as Jeff Hafley did, because he coached college guys and he was very close with them. But he, again, knows who the Packers are, knows the way they play, has coached against that offense can kind of give him tidbits on, hey, Matt LaFleur, this is what I studied in your offensive scheme and what worked so well for our defense, especially in those second halves of the last couple games, really all 3 games, Bears Packers this last year. So I think that could be a home run hire. But again, he's never been a defensive coordinator, but he's been a coach for now a decade and a half at the collegiate and the professional level. And that could be a great hire. But then again, you just don't know, right? Because when they brought in Jeff Hafley, I think a lot of us were kind of confused. Wait, you're bringing in a former college head coach who was a DB's coach in the NFL such a long time ago. Didn't even know if Hafley wanted to coach in the NFL, and now he's a head coach with the Dolphins. But that was a shock. That was a surprise. I wouldn't be as surprised if the Packers brought back one of their Hall of Famers into the fold in Al Harris. But Al Harris, one of 4 confirmed interviews the Packers have gone through for their open defensive coordinator job ever since Jeff Hafley left for the head coaching vacancy in Miami. And we'll see what comes to fruition. We still don't, I just want to acknowledge, we still don't know the details of Matt LaFleur's reported extension, and that even of general manager Brian Gutekunst's or executive vice president Russ Ball. We know it happened, or at least reportedly happened, and the agreement only took a day, according to reports. But we don't even know the details. It's kind of jarring. Not that there is any doubt in my mind, because reports have come out that it was never really in question. The day after the Packers lost to the Bears, Ed Policy met with each one of them separately, that being LaFleur, Goody, and Ball, and told him of his interest in extending their contracts, because of course all of them would be entering contract years in the fall. So it's not like they wouldn't have made the deals. It wouldn't have been done. But it's just, I mean, the fact that Brian Gutekunst is yet to have his end of season presser is shocking. I mean, we'd have that the week after the season. And there's not even details in sight of their contracts that would even push us toward thinking we'd be talking to Goody in the next couple weeks. I thought that after the John Harbaugh details were released, the 5-year, $100 million, 20 per, that the Packers would be fine with releasing what LaFleur would be making, or at least there were negotiations there. And once that number was finalized, $20 million a year, okay, LaFleur had some leverage in saying I should get paid 20 or 19 or 18 or whatever it may be. But we just don't know. And we have yet to talk to Goody about the future of this Packers team, in which we will talk about on the other side of WFRV Plus Sports Night. 21 free agents, I think 9 key unrestricted free agents. You and I talked about this on WFRV Plus Sports Night, I think it was last week, about what I think will happen, and I'm going to chat on it a little bit more next on the show. And we're back, WFRV Plus Sports Night. Let's wrap up the show. We've already covered a lot. Freddie Peralta is a New York Met, no longer a Milwaukee Brewer, after he was traded in a deal that sent Tobias Myers to the Mets as well. And in return, Milwaukee received a pair of top prospects in Brandon Sproat and Jet Williams. Williams, an infielder, can play the outfield as well, a righty hitter at the plate. And Sproat, a righty pitcher, 6'3", good length, out of Pace University. We also talked about Al Harris, the former Packers corner and Packers Hall of Famer and current Bears DB's coach, getting an interview for the Packers defensive coordinator opening. And now we're going to chat a little more about this Packers team. Romeo Doubs was on the Kay Adams show and told her, I want to be a Packer, but I don't know what's going to happen. I understand what the business is. I just want to play football at the end of the day, but I would love to be a Green Bay Packer. As much as I do think the Packers could benefit in keeping Romeo Doubs, a guy who had career years and a career year in receptions and targets and receiving yards and this, that, and the other, had that career game against the Cowboys, 3 touchdowns. It's a lot like the Brewers. They just can't keep him. Doubs is going to garner a lot of attention, get a lot of money in free agency. His 4 years in Green Bay is up, and unless the Packers want to drop a bag or some kind of short-term prove-it deal, in which Romeo Doubs doesn't need to do, because He just led the team with 55 receptions, or pardon me, 63 receptions if you include the postseason, and 848 receiving yards, had 124 and a tutty and 8 receptions in that loss to the Bears in the wild card round. He didn't need to prove anything. Romeo Doubs is going to get a lot of money. He could be a wide receiver 1. With his skills, his hands, seems like he's having a lot more fun with the game. Everything regarding around his suspension last year was put to bed. He missed a game, came back, had a couple touchdowns, and now he's celebrating like he's a new man, or he did on the field this past year. So there really isn't much risk with Romeo Doubs at this current juncture. But he said he would love to return as a Green Bay Packer. This is the reason why I don't think it's possible. Matthew Golden didn't have the year that a lot of people anticipated, even though, again, he was in a very crowded wide receiver room, because the Packers didn't draft Matthew Golden to be a Jackson Smith-Njigba, who had 63 receptions in his rookie year, 100 receptions in his second, and is now, the leading receiving yard getter in the NFL with nearly 1,800 this year in the regular season, and his team's playing for an NFC championship. They drafted Matthew Golden for the future. Not knowing what would happen with Christian Watson, of course, then they extended him the 1 year, but again, he could get paid a whole lot of money next year that the Packers might not be able to afford. Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks in their third years. They're both entering the final years of their contract next year. You draft Matthew Golden, you draft Savion Williams as security blankets. You hope that they could have big years. Savion Williams saved them the game against the Giants in Week 10, and Matthew Golden did have a few breakout performances, but you didn't expect him to be wide receiver 1. You didn't even expect anyone to be wide receiver 1, but because there were 3-4 guys ahead of him, that's why you drafted Matthew Golden for the future, and that's why you can't keep Romeo Doubs. You just do not have the funds to do so. So that's why I believe that Romeo Doubs will not be a Packer next year, which could hurt Green Bay. I get it. Christian Watson was so pivotal at the end of the year. Tucker Kraft, right? If you had him in the back half of the year, maybe Romeo Doubs doesn't play as much of a role. But it felt like every time the Packers needed a moment that wasn't just a long touchdown, or it was Romeo Doubs. You need a first down, Doubs. And I don't think you're going to be able to afford Romeo Doubs. Because on that Kay Adams show, FanDuel's own Kay Adams told Romeo, hey, a lot of teams are going to wine and dine you, and you accept that because Doubs has deserved it after what he did this past year. He has been a model of consistency in the pass-catching room where you can assure anyone he's going to make 4 to 5 catches. You might not remember them, but it's not about remembering them. He can move the sticks. He can take off. He has speed, great hands catcher. Another team is going to utilize him in ways that the Packers would love to, but they just can't afford to. And that's why I believe Romeo Doubs will not be a Green Bay Packer, which, yes, I think they'll miss. We'll see how much they miss him next year. Okay, that'll do it for WFRV Plus Sports Night. I've been Cameron News there. We will see you next time. Again, Freddie Peralta is a New York Met, no longer on the Milwaukee Brewers. That's the big news of the day. And Al Harris, former Packer, interviewing for that DC job. If you want to watch former defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley's introductory press conference with the Dolphins, that is Thursday, so tomorrow. And we'll chat a little more about that on the show tomorrow. We'll see you then.